Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Royal Statistical Society's Professional Statisticians Forum. My name is Trevor Lewis, and I will be giving the presentation today entitled CStat Revalidation, Your Questions Answered. I'm a member of the Professional Affairs Committee of the RSS, which is the committee responsible for professional matters, and as such is responsible for the implementation of the CStat revalidation process. Like all members of the Professional Affairs Committee, I'm a chartered statistician and I'm also a chartered scientist. My career as a statistician has included 8 years in academia, 22 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and most recently 10 years working as an independent statistical consultant. So, welcome to this presentation on chartered statistician revalidation, which aims to pull together information on the revalidation process. And in doing so, hopefully will answer any questions you may have about the process in general and how it affects you in particular. In this presentation, I will try and cover questions that have already been raised by those participating in the Chartered Statistician revalidation process this year. And as already mentioned, please raise questions using the Q&A interface on the web conferencing screen during the presentation, and I will either try and incorporate responding to the question in my presentation, or at the end of the presentation, raise your questions either through the Q&A interface or verbally over the phone line. Moving on to slide 2 then. The outline of the presentation is shown on this slide. I will start with an overview of CStat revalidation. You may recall we announced the introduction of revalidation at the beginning of 2012, and so there was a need to transition the existing CStat holders into the process. And so we will say a little about that transition. We will then summarize the outcome of the first cohort to go through the revalidation process in 2014. We will then go into some detail on the revalidation process being adopted in 2015 for the cohort who have a revalidation date of the 1st of January 2016. And this is referred to in the slides as the second cohort. Revalidation is based largely on continuing professional development, so we will then say a little about the recording and scope of CPD, and this is the aspect about which most questions are raised. And finally, we will cover the support materials that are available to you to help with maintaining a record of your CPD, ensuring that your CPD is supportive of your career development, and ensuring that you understand the requirements for revalidation. Okay, moving on to slide 3 then. In order to give an overview of CStat revalidation process, we will cover the following 5 questions. What is revalidation? Who needs to undertake revalidation? Why did we introduce revalidation for CStat? What is the basis of revalidation? And finally, how does the 5-year cycle operate? So on slide 4, we ask the question, what is revalidation? Well, revalidation is a process to be successfully completed in order to retain CStat professionally active status. Sometimes such a process is referred to as renewal or reaccreditation, but the RSS chose the term revalidation. The aim is to confirm maintenance of professional standards by declaration and also by providing evidence. Revalidation is a form of professional appraisal carried out by the Society. In this respect, you may want to compare it with the performance appraisal carried out by an employer. So the focus of revalidation is professionalism in your working life, whereas the focus of a performance appraisal is the achievement of goals and the development of skills and knowledge in support of goal delivery. By professionalism, we are focusing on being trustworthy, ethical, up-to-date and competent, which is a shorthand for the approach to professional life which is codified in the Society's Code of Conduct. Moving to slide 5, we just clarify who needs to undertake revalidation. As the panel on the left shows, it's the professionally active chartered statistician. So let's say a little about the exceptions which are given on the right-hand side. We first of all should note that those chartered statisticians who also hold the Chartered Scientist Award undertake the Science Council's annual revalidation process rather than the Chartered Statistician revalidation process. And successful completion of the Science Council's process, which is administered by the RSS, serves the needs for maintaining both CSI and CStat awards. So if you are someone who holds both awards, then the detail of what I'm going to present today won't apply to you while you hold both awards. The detail of the approach for chartered scientists is given on the RSS website, and I'll give the web address for that towards the end of the presentation. But many of the principles are the same, and so I think most of the material is still relevant. Now, for those on a career break or with extenuating circumstances during the 5-year cycle, revalidation may be deferred, and each case is treated on its merits, but in general, deferment may be the best course of action if the career break or extenuating circumstances cover a period including the 5th year of the 5-year cycle. For those permanently retired, or those who have had a permanent career change away from statistics, there is no need to undertake revalidation in order to retain the CStat status, although in this case the professional register will indicate that you are no longer professionally active. And finally, those professionally qualified fellows who retain the professional qualifications of the Institute of Statisticians, MIS and FIS, at the time of the merger with the Royal Statistical Society in 1993, they do not have to undertake revalidation to retain the MIS and FIS awards. Now on slide 6, we cover why we introduced revalidation in 2012. Fundamentally, it was a key part of our strategy to raise the status and value of the award, both to those holding the award and to the beneficiaries of their work, be they employers, clients, funders, etc. Specifically, revalidation increases the credibility of CStat as a professional award, as it says something about your capability today rather than at the time you originally received the award. And the importance of this was expressed in a number of discussions we held with employers. It also reflects trends in continuing professional development policy of professional bodies, with a move from policies that were voluntary to mandated approaches that are monitored. Recall that the CPD policy of the Society has been mandatory for professionally qualified fellows since its introduction in 2004, so revalidation is introducing monitoring of an existing mandated policy. And finally, our experience with Chartered Scientist revalidation process, which started in around 2010, confirmed in our minds the benefit of such a process and also our ability to manage an efficient and effective process for our members. So, moving to slide 7. Slide 7 indicates that the basis of revalidation process is adherence to the Code of Conduct and compliance with the CPD policy of the Society. the former being confirmed primarily by declaration, whereas we will ask for evidence of the latter. So the Code of Conduct was put in place in 1993 and has been mandated for chartered statisticians since that date, and it was revised last year. There is a phrase in the original Code of Conduct which states, "Fellows shall seek to upgrade their professional knowledge and skill and shall maintain awareness of technological developments, procedures and standards which are relevant to their field." And it's this aspect of the code which was expanded upon by the CPD policy which was introduced in 2004 and was revised in 2009. And we will come back to say more about the CPD policy later in the presentation. So moving to slide 8 then, this slide shows a schematic of the 5-year cycle. So the expectation is that in compliance with the CPD policy, chartered statisticians will prepare a CPD summary in each year. For most members that CPD summary will serve multiple purposes. As well as satisfying the requirements of the CPD policy of the Society, hence their revalidation needs, it will also serve or may serve to support their employees' appraisal process or be part of their up-to-date CV and professional profile or support their development and career planning. Now, although you will prepare a CPD summary for each year, you should not submit anything to the Society until you receive a request at the beginning of year 5 of the 5-year cycle. Moving to slide 9, you will see a breakdown of the activities in year 5. Now, a point to emphasise is that this does not represent a full year of activity by chartered statisticians. We're not asking you to commit a year's worth of work to revalidating. Far from it. Much of the time is free elapsed time or for administrative and assessment activities undertaken by professional affairs staff and volunteers at the Society. So going through the steps from left to right on this slide, in year 4 of the cycle you will receive an email reminding you that next year is your year 5. That is the year when you need to submit information, and we will outline the timetable of activities. In January of year 5 you will receive an email outlining the precise programme of revalidation activities. And by the end of March, all chartered statisticians, for which this is year 5, will need to make their initial submission, which will include making a declaration and providing basic information. So for most, this will be all you'll need to submit. So feedback on this initial submission will be provided in April, including an indication of whether you have been selected for audit. The selection of members for audit will be on a risk-based assessment, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. And we may vary the percent selected for audit, but our experience with the Chartered Scientist revalidation process, and indeed last year with the Chartered Statistician revalidation process, is that we tended to audit around 10 to 15%. When we say that the selection of the audit sample is risk-based, typically if your initial submission was felt to be of poor quality by the assessment panel, then you're more likely to get selected for audit than if you've made a very good initial submission. And we can say a little bit more about that in the Q&A session if required. Those selected for audit will be notified in April and will be required to make their audit submission in June. And the panel of assessors will meet over the summer and provide feedback by early September at the latest. So hopefully these last 5 or 6 slides have given an overview of the general CStat revalidation process. Okay, so we'll now, if you like, go into the implementation and explain a little about the transition into this process following its introduction at the beginning of 2012. Could I ask that if you've not muted that you do mute your phone? I think there's just 1 or 2 coughs that I can hear in the background, and maybe it would be helpful if everybody was on mute by pressing *6 on their telephone keypad. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to slide 10. This slide describes the transition when we introduced CStat revalidation at the beginning of 2012. Those members who received their CStat award prior to 2012 are split into 3 cohorts, and these are the top 3 panels in red, green and purple on this slide. The first going through revalidation process in 2014 based on their CPD summaries in the calendar years 2012-2013. The second going through revalidation in 2015 based on their summaries for calendar years 2012 through to 2014. And the third going through revalidation in 2016 based on their CPD summaries for the calendar years 2012 through to 2015. So if you like, that dealt with all of the chartered statisticians who were in place at the beginning of 2012. Those awarded their CStat during 2012 essentially have 2012 as their year 0, which is an opportunity to make sure they're aware of what they need to do to comply with the Code of Conduct and the CPD policy. And so they started their first cycle in 2013, and so their year 5 revalidation process will take place in 2017. And then finally, the 5th cohort on the slide are those who are awarded CStat in 2013, and they will undergo revalidation process in 2018. Now, of course, once we get round the cycle, then we cycle back to the first cohort, and so those who received their CStat status last year in 2014, they join those members in the first cohort on this slide who successfully revalidated last year and will undergo revalidation in 2019. So hopefully that sort of sets the scene as how we started off the revalidation process. So, as you'll have seen from that slide, moving on to slide 11, we undertook revalidation, CStat revalidation for the first time last year. So I'd just like to say a little bit about the process so you get a feel for how it's worked, at least in its first year. So on slide 11, you will see that as of January 2014, there were 190 professionally active chartered statisticians on the professional register with a revalidation date of the 1st of January 2015. However, this snapshot of the register was taken prior to the completion of the subscription renewal process. And by mid-April, 15 of those 190 had chosen not to continue membership of the society or had defaulted, which left 175 in the cohort going through the revalidation process. So if you like, 8% of those who we thought would be going through revalidation actually had chosen to leave the society prior to 2015. This was not an increase, so revalidation hadn't really increased the number of defaulters. In the previous year it had been 6% of the chartered statisticians had defaulted by this time in mid-April. So we then need to look at the 175, and moving on to slide 12 shows the outcome of the revalidation process. And I'll go through this table line by line. So 115 fully met the revalidation requirements, 109 of these based on their initial submission, and 6 following their audit submission. On the second line, you'll see that 2 of those selected for audit met the requirements, but with some reservations expressed by the assessment panel. And so their revalidation was approved for 2 rather than 5 years. On the third row, you'll see that 15 had extenuating circumstances, and so their revalidation was deferred for a year. Extenuating circumstances are often around health issues that may have affected people, but additionally in this first year of the process, it became apparent midway through the process that the email addresses provided by some members were not reliable email addresses, and we chose for those individuals to defer revalidation for a year in order to give them full information in the required time frame. Hopefully we've resolved that sort of issue for this year. Moving on to the fourth line of the table, 6 members indicated that they were on or about to start a career break, and so their revalidation is deferred until they return from their career break. 12 members indicated that they had recently retired or were planning to retire later in 2014, and 25 indicated that they did not wish to continue to hold the CStat award beyond the end of 2014, or did not respond to any correspondence by email or follow-up letter. So you can see from the table then that a total of 76% continued as professionally active, 3% were on a career break, so temporarily not professionally active, 7% were recently retired or planning to retire during the year, and 14% were removed from the CStat register at the end of the year. Just to say, we audited 12 individuals last year, which was about 10% of those eligible for audit. Okay, so much then for last year. Let's now move on to the revalidation process for this year, which we refer to as the second cohort. So slide 13 shows that the date of the email sent to initiate the revalidation process this year was the 15th of January, and the date by which the initial submissions needs to be received is the 31st of March. For the majority of those in this cohort, the initial submission will complete the process, and for those selected for audit, who will be notified in April, the final date for the audit submission to be received will be the end of June. So first let's look at the initial submission so that we get clarity on that part of the process. Slide 14 briefly describes 3 options that members are asked to choose from in their initial submissions. So option A is the option that obviously most people choose, which is to make a declaration and return a CPD summary for 2014. We'll say a little bit more about that declaration on the next slide. Option B is for people who wish to continue to hold the CStat award but cannot make the declaration, and this is more often than not because they are not currently professionally active, and that would maybe because of a career break, extenuating circumstances, or retirement. And option C is the option to be chosen for people who do not wish to revalidate. So So let's just go through each of those three options in more detail and cover the material which was included on the email that was sent out at the beginning, in the middle of January. So slide 15 describes option A. And there are 3 parts to this option, and I'll just read through those 3 statements. So the first is, I would like to revalidate and continue to hold the Charter Statistician Award from the 1st of January 2016 until my next revalidation date. Okay, then the second statement, which is the declaration, I affirm that I will continue to be professionally active, comply with the RSS CPD policy, and adhere to the RSS Code of Conduct. And if my professional circumstances change, such that I'm not able to fulfill these obligations, then I will contact the Society immediately. So the declaration has 4 points to it then: being professionally active, complying with the CPD policy, adhering to the Code of Conduct, and a commitment to let the Society know should the circumstances change. And then we also asked you to attach a CPD summary for the calendar year 2014 with your reply. Now, as a point of detail, I would mention that it is helpful to label your CPD summary with your surname and membership number so that it can be readily identified as yours. And bear in mind that we'll be dealing with over 200 of these, so it's important to get the labelling done and to help us with identifying whose CPD summary belongs to who. Now, as indicated on the slide, if you select this option, you may be selected for audit and be required to submit further information about your professional experience and development in the years 2012 to 2014, or a subset of those years. And you'll be notified whether you have been selected for audit during April. So that's the detail behind option A. On slide 16, we describe option B. So again, I'll read out the option. I wish to continue to hold my Charter Statistician Award. However, due to a career break, extenuating circumstances or retirement, I am unable to make the declaration described in option A. Now, as indicated on this slide, if you select this option, you need to provide a brief explanation of your circumstances. Note that the guidance allows the Society the discretion to defer revalidation for up to 3 years in the cases of career breaks and extenuating circumstances, and in the case of permanent retirement from professional activity or a permanent career change, your Charter Statistician status can be retained and revalidation no longer required. But bear in mind that if you choose option B, then your entry on the professional register will reflect the fact that you're not professionally active, and this will be temporarily on the professional register for a career break and extenuating circumstances, but permanently there should you indicate retirement or a permanent career change. And finally then, on the following slide, that is slide 17, we describe option C. So, as indicated on the slide, this is for people for whom the following statement is true. I do not wish to revalidate and do not wish to continue to hold Charter Statistician Award beyond the 31st of December 2015. Now, our experience from the CSI revalidation process, and indeed from last year's Chartered Statistician revalidation process, is that a small number of members select this option because of a misunderstanding of the revalidation requirements. So we're keen to make sure that members only choose this option fully understanding other options that are available. And that's why we ask you to explain the primary reason for your decision. For a number of people, we've been able to get back to them, clarify 1 or 2 points, and they've decided to choose either option A or option B. So in summary then, we require the option choice A, B or C to be made by the 31st of March And unfortunately, if no response is received by that date, we will have to assume that option C has been selected. Okay, so that's gone through the option choice in some detail. So next, let's now return to what happens next on slide 18. First of all, let's deal with those who selected option A. In April, we will assess the CPD returns from those who selected option A. The feedback we will provide initially will be overall feedback on the quality of the set of CP submissions that we have received. And if there are any general misunderstandings, we will point them out and point you where, probably on the website, there is some further supportive information that might clarify this for future years. And once you have received this general feedback, however, if you would like specific feedback on your submission, you just need to let us know and we will provide it. We will also let you know whether or not you have been selected for audit, and if you have been selected, guidance on what you need to do. So, for example, if we had felt that there was some deficiency on your original CPD submission, we will point that out so that when you make your audit submission, you can rectify the problem. Moving on then to if you selected option B, we will confirm receipt in April or before and indicate our response to your explanation of your circumstances. If you have indicated that you're on a career break or have extenuating circumstances, we will recommend an approach to possible deferment of your revalidation. And as mentioned earlier, deferment is likely to be a recommended course of action if your career break or extenuating circumstances are current or in the recent past. If you have indicated that you are now permanently retired or have permanently moved away from a career in statistics, we will confirm receipt and update the professional register to reflect the fact that you have retired and so are not professionally active. And finally then, if you have selected option C, we will confirm receipt and confirm that your CStat status will cease at the end of the year. But we will also clarify the possibility of reapplying for CStat status in the future. So if you are not selected for audit, the process completes for you at this point, and your revalidation date would normally be reset to the 1st of January 2021. So let's now look at the audit process. So this is covered in the next two slides. On slide 19, we talk about the content of the information we request for audit, and on slide 20, we talk a little bit more about the format in which we request the information. So the aim, looking at slide 19 then, is to collect information about your CPD activities over the calendar years 2012 to 2014, or a subset of these years, and to ensure that your programme of CPD is in line with the expectation of the Society's CPD policy. And we'll talk a little bit more about the CPD policy in a later slide. So looking at the top left box first, in particular we're concerned that to confirm that the CPD you have undertaken is aligned with the needs of your current job role or your career aspirations. So we ask for a career summary, which for most people is taken as an extract from their CV. Going to the bottom left box on this slide, we also ask you to reflect on how your programme of CPD activities have supported the development of relevant skills, knowledge and experience, and how it has helped you deliver to the customers of your services. So these customers might be project teams that you work in, clients that you do consultancy for, students whose research you support or who you teach, colleagues you supervise or mentor, etc., etc. And then the box on the bottom right, finally we ask for a list of supporting information that should be provided that could be provided to clarify or confirm the information that you have given. So notice at this point we're not asking you to provide the information, just list what you could provide if asked. Now, one of the questions we often get asked is about confidentiality. The information that you provide will be treated in the strictest confidence, and we have found even for people working with confidential information in government or commercially confidential information in the private sector, we have found ways to overcome these concerns. We also provide the option for you to give a referee who is able to confirm your information rather than providing the assessment panel with access to confidential reports. So one way or another, we always seem to be able to overcome any confidentiality concerns. But if you have them, then you should raise them with us and we will talk through how best to overcome those problems. So if we move on then to slide 20, we just say a little bit about the format by which we ask the information. So here we mention the revalidation form that we use, on which we expect you to provide the information. So using this template enables you to provide the information in a way that is efficient and useful for you and also for the panel of assessors. And on this form we give an indication of the amount of detail we want. So for various questions we give a range of number of words that we're expecting in your response to the particular questions. So the form has 7 sections, and we've essentially talked through all of them, maybe except the one on development planning, which is the next to last one listed on the right-hand side of this slide. We include this simply to encourage you to think ahead about your future development needs. So note that this revalidation form described on this slide is already available to download from the web page given at the top of this slide. The point I would stress is that this form does not need to be completed for the initial submission. It's only there for use for those people selected for audit. Now certainly you can download it and fill it out for your own benefit, but there's no expectation for you to submit it for the initial submission, only for audit purposes. So to reiterate, if selected for audit, the audit submission will need to be provided by the end of June, and the panel of assessors will give feedback by early September. Okay, so now let's move on to say a little bit more about continuing professional development, and in particular the policy of the Society. Okay, so very briefly then, let me talk about the so-called CPD cycle. Now this is on slide 21. The revalidation process focuses on the action part of this cycle and the recording of the activities that you have undertaken, and the evaluation part, the reflection on the outcome and benefits of the activities. This cycle points to the need to then move on to assessing what you need to do next, and then planning for future activities. So the evaluation and assessment can only really be effectively undertaken if you have documented what you have done. And so let's look at documenting and recording your CPD activities. And that documenting and recording is part of this, if you like, providing the submission for the revalidation process. Now this is covered on slide 22, and this slide is intended to point out 2 things. One is the emphasis that the Society is quite happy for you to record your CPD in whatever way is most convenient for you, and also to point out the requirements of the CPD policy of the Society, and that's in the right-hand panel on this slide. So going to the left-hand panel then, you can use any method you want. Some people use a personally developed spreadsheet to capture the information. Others use some employer system which may support the employer's appraisal process. There is the RSS online CPD system, which can be accessed from the website, and I'll talk a little bit more about how to access it later on slide. There is the RSS MS Word template, again, which is available on the website, and I'm sure there are other ways in which other sources of systems or structures to record your CPD, and we're quite happy for you to use any of these. However, the caveat is on the right-hand side. You may need, if you use another system, you may need to edit it slightly or add additional information, because what we're looking for in compliance with the CPD policy of the Society are primarily three things. One, that the activities that you've covered on an annual basis cover at least 3 of the 5 categories of activity defined in the CPD policy of the Society. And we'll talk about those categories on a later slide. We also need some evidence that you've committed at least 60 learning hours. And note in the CPD policy of the Society we talk about learning hours rather than elapsed time carrying out activities. And we can say a little bit more about that should you have questions. And also, we will require some indication of assessment of outcome or benefit of the activities you've undertaken. Now, if you use either of the RSS online system or the RSS template, then all of these 3 aspects are explicitly present. But if you've used another system, then you may need to edit in or provide some additional summary information to confirm that these 3 attributes have been satisfied. Okay, what I would like to do now is to move on to talk about the scope of CPD, and that's covered on slide 23. So we often get asked the question, well, I do these sorts of things, are they covered, are they acceptable as CPD activities? So let me try and talk about this in generality, and hopefully that will answer any specific questions you may have about your own circumstances. The main point that I want to make here is that it is not restricted to the development of technical skills and knowledge. Typically, you need a broader set of knowledge and skill than just technical in order to ensure your professional input is relevant, makes an impact, and is effective. So the technical skills are the foundation. The fact that you have them is probably the reason why you got your job, but to be effective in that job, you need other skills as well. So to be relevant, you need knowledge of the context in which you're working. So this context knowledge involves any legal or regulatory framework that affects the sector in which you're working, and any standards that are established by your sector or your employer for how work gets done. In addition, it involves gaining and maintaining knowledge of the business setting in which you're working. So using the term business in a general sense here, it could be the business of education, the business of government, the business of pharmaceutical R&D, the business of market research, of manufacturing automobiles, or of operating as an independent statistical consultant. So you need to, in a sense, maintain knowledge of your business sector, and also knowledge of the scientific, medical, or social context in which data are collected. And to make an impact, you need the interpersonal skills to effectively communicate with co-workers and deliver your technical contribution. So many statisticians work in multidisciplinary teams, and in this context, your teamwork and your leadership skills are valuable to ensure that the team as a whole delivers and that your statistical contribution enhances team performance and the quality of the team output. So interpersonal skills are very important. And then finally, depending on the size and nature of the organisation you work in, there will be processes in place to support people and people development, and also the delivery of tasks. The knowledge of these processes and the skills to manage, facilitate and operate within them can greatly increase the effectiveness of the contribution you can make. So CPD covers developing knowledge and maintaining knowledge, skills and experience in all of these areas. Now I'm going to skip over slide 24 because that simply is a summary of what we've said, and I guess giving some sort of keywords to each of these areas in which you might be developing knowledge and skill or maintaining knowledge and skill. So that's talked a little bit about the content of the CPD, and now just to say a little bit about CPD type of activities. This is something which is covered in the CPD policy of the Society. So on slide 25 are the categories that are recommended in the RSS CPD policy. In the appendix of the CPD policy, there is a definition of each of these categories and a series of examples of activities. Now, the principal value of the categorization is to demonstrate the broad range of activities that can be used to support your professional development. But there's two specific points I would make here. Firstly, formal training sessions do contribute to your CPD, but they are by no means the only way of doing so, and will typically make only a minor contribution towards your overall CPD program. And the second point that I would make is, do not forget about the major contribution that work-based learning can make towards your CPD. Some people incorrectly totally ignore this category of learning, whereas others incorrectly list all the activities that appear in their job description. I think typically it is the case that many activities in your job role do have a learning component, and it is legitimate to count these in your CPD summary. However, it is only a proportion of the time you spend in these activities that typically has a learning value. Hence the concept of learning hours described in the CPD policy of the Society. It is worth saying here that it is possible to make the case for a particular activity falling into more than one of these categories. So don't get hung up on the categorization. Just allocate an activity to a category you can justify. The key point is that you should be thinking of using the full range of activities available to you to support your professional development. Okay, so we're now in the home straight, in that we're just a couple of slides to talk about support for revalidation, and I think just about all of these areas of support can be found on the RSS website. So on slide 26 then, the first panel on this slide points to the CStat revalidation webpage and the CSI revalidation webpage. So this is where the general information about the revalidation processes exists, and if you have the Chartered Scientist Award, then it's the second of these, which would be the primary source of information. If you don't hold the Chartered Scientist Award, then it is the CStat revalidation webpage you should refer to. The RSS Code of Conduct, of course, is also on the website, and there's the web address for that. Clearly, if you're making the declaration, then you should make sure that you understand what you are committing to adhere to in the Code of Conduct and give it a quick read. The CPD policy of the Society, which I've referred to a number of times, can be found on the CPD webpage. The address is given on the slide. And there is a report on that webpage which gives additional guidance which you might find useful and picks up on a number of points that people often are not quite sure of and don't necessarily fully understand in the policy. On the CPD webpage, there is also a video demonstrating the use of the RSS online CPD system. Now, one point I would make is that that video initially shows accessing the online CPD system via the old website. As most of you are aware, I'm sure the RSS website has been very recently updated. So the introduction to that video, in a sense, is a little out of date, and you should simply go to www.rss.org.uk/CPD, and then from there, that web page contains all the information that's mentioned in the video, and then from there you can access the RSS online system. It takes you through the My RSS menu, and then you get to it straight away. The RSS MS Word template can be found on a web page called CPD Profiles, and that is a simple template to use. And I've already mentioned, if you use that format, then that captures all of the information required for revalidation. Okay, switching on to slide 27. On the CPD Profiles web page, there is also 16 exemplars that have been taken from your colleagues who have submitted for previous audit processes. So those exemplars not only show CPD summaries that have been found to be of high standard, but also completion of the revalidation form. Now note the revalidation form does change a little from year to year, so you can't rely on it being exactly relevant, but broadly speaking, those examples are relevant to audit submissions. And in the second panel, I point out that if you want to, in a sense, a little bit more information about continuing professional development, there was a Professional Statisticians Forum session held some time ago on continuing professional development, and not only are there slides on the PSF webpage, but also extensive notes. So if you go to the PSF webpage, whose address is given there, at the bottom of that page you can click to past events, and you can download the slides and extensive notes on CPD from there. There's also a brochure on CPD opportunities at the RSS, so activities that the RSS runs that could contribute towards your CPD. And finally, there is the email address that you can always contact if you have any questions about revalidation or the CPD policy of the Society, etc. Okay, so a final summary slide on page 28, slide 28. So in summary then, revalidation is a professional appraisal process introduced with the objective of raising the value of the CStat award. It is intended to be a supportive process to encourage good professional practice. The intention is to minimize extra work required from those managing their career progression as a professional statistician. It's a two-stage process, an initial submission by all and additional information requested from a selected sample. And if in doubt on any of the aspects of revalidation, you can contact us at pac@rss.org.uk for clarification and support. Okay, so the final slide is any questions. So are there any questions then, please? Okay. Oh, I've got two questions over the Q&A, I think. Okay, so I'll read the question out. What material might be expected as supporting information? Some might be obvious, but others not. What would be expected if activity was refereeing a paper? Okay, fine. So what material is expected? So certainly if people have published material, then they would indicate the published paper. If people had written an internal report, they would indicate that the report could be provided. If people have attended training sessions, sometimes they would provide an attendance certificate or maybe the notes that have been distributed. Conference attendance, again, evidence of attendance at a conference. The specific question asked here was, though, if you had been refereeing a paper. I guess there is always correspondence where you've been asked to be a referee or been thanked for the refereeing review that you've given, and that documentation would be perfectly adequate. So, but just to emphasise, if selected for audit, initially you were asked just to list the things you could provide if requested. You don't have to actually submit them unless asked. I hope that answers your question. If not, please submit a follow-up question. Okay. Could you clarify the exemption for holding FIS? Was another question asked. Yes. Those people who retained FIS and MIS, they don't need to undertake revalidation to retain those awards. This was a decision we made when we introduced revalidation for CStat. So it's just a blanket exemption that's given for the people holding those awards, FIS and MIS. And that was really because those awards are no longer given and haven't been since 1993. So people who wish to retain those can retain them under the same conditions as was in place in 1993. Okay, so another question then. If attending an external seminar held by other professional bodies, are we expected to provide contact details of someone within that body, and do the RSS approach them for confirmation of attendance? No, I think all we would expect is for you to indicate you've attended the seminar. Typically, for many seminars, there wouldn't be attendance sheets, but you may have a record of being at the seminar, maybe a handout that was given or some notes that were taken at the seminar, and that would be sufficient. I don't believe I can recall a situation where we've gone back to the external seminar provider and asked for confirmation. The revalidation process is essentially a process which is a process that's carried out on trust, and by and large we would trust you to give reliable information. Okay, so there doesn't appear to be any further follow-up questions, so maybe if I could just make some final comments. First of all, to thank you all for dialing in. I hope you found the session useful. There will be further meetings of the Professional Statisticians Forum, and those meetings are described on the PSF webpage. If I just mention the next two meetings that are posted there, on the 25th of March, there is a meeting on exploiting administrative data to help users of official statistics, and that presentation is given by the winner of the Official Statistics Award of the Society. And then on the 4th of June, there is another meeting, again using the same format as this meeting, which is entitled A Conceptual, Technical and Practical Framework for Missing Data in Longitudinal Clinical Studies. And this is based on the work of the person who won the Statistical Excellence Award in the pharmaceutical industry. So that's on the 4th of June. So these meetings and any future meetings planned by the PSF that can be found on the PSF webpage. As I've already mentioned, a podcast of this meeting will be available next week. And I should also mention that the RSS does run other meetings of this format. In particular, the Journal Club has a webinar using a similar format in 2 weeks' time on the 24th of February, and that's called Doubly Robust Estimation of the Local Average Treatment Effect Curve. And that's, again, details of that can be found on the RSS website. and indeed on Stats Life, I believe. So with those final comments, again, to thank you for your attendance, and we'll close the meeting here. Thank you very much indeed.